How to sell anything in 76 minutes or less. My name is Sean, and that's exactly what I'm actually here to tell you today. Okay, and it's exact same strategy how I was able to close over $1.5 million in the past year. Okay, so let's jump right in. Now, very first of all, I want to make something very clear. Okay, here is something I'm going to show you guys, and it's essentially a graph. Now, this graph, you probably haven't seen something like this for years probably, but essentially on this graph that we have here, right, there is the far left, there's the middle, and then there's the right. On the left, we're going to have the kind of person that is below average, a little bit below average on their offer, okay? And in the middle, we have the average, right, average person in sales, and on the right, we have the above average person, okay? So I want to make this very clear. It does not matter where you fall on this graph, whether you're below average, average, or above average. At any point, you are going to you're going to get something out of this video. You are going to learn something, and it's going to help you close more deals. So stick around to the very end, okay? So let's erase this now. And I want to, how I want to basically show you guys what I'm doing today. I want to give you a description of the old way of selling, okay, why that doesn't work anymore, and basically the new way of selling and why this is just 10 times better. How to know if you're basically selling the old way. There's no name for it specifically. There's no this is called NEPQ. No, it's just the old way of selling, okay? And how you know if how you basically know if you're selling this old way is by answering this question, okay? So I want you to think about this. Does rapport matter or not? The answer is no. The answer is no. Obviously, it's not. It does matter in some cases, but in general, rapport does not matter nearly as much as you probably think. Imagine we are selling to a person, right? And there's one way to sell them, which is the left way, and there's the right way of selling. Okay? Now it's just direction. There's no the right way is the right way. It's left and right. Okay? So this left way of selling, this first way, okay? Let's actually, instead of forget the left and right, let's do 1 and 2. Okay, there's the first way, and then there's the second way of selling to this person, okay? The first way is basically you get them to like you as much as possible. They absolutely love you, right? They see you as their best friend. But what you're selling, they can kind of tell that it's just, it's not going to help them, right? Now, the other way, number 2, is basically they don't really like you that much as a person, but they trust and they know that if they buy what you're selling, they are going to get a return on their investment for sure. Now, I want you to think, which one or two is the customer more likely to buy? Which one is it? Which method is more likely to work on the customer? The answer is 2. Because in general, even if the customer doesn't like you, if they know that what they're buying is going to give them a return on their investment, they're going to buy. Okay, now obviously there are some odd exceptions where the person doesn't like you and out of ego, even though they know what you're selling is good, they're not going to buy. Of course, that happens in general. Is sometimes it's going to happen, but in general, right? If they know that what they're getting is true, and it's going to help them get an ROI, they are going to buy. And the whole point of saying this is not to say that rapport does not matter, okay? The whole point of saying this is to show you that the one thing that could make or break your sales call is establishing value. It's not rapport, okay? It's not rapport. So I'll make that extremely clear, all right? And another way of knowing that you're selling this, old way of sales is very surface level questions. Questions like, what keeps you awake at night? What is your, what do you what's your motive? What drives you? These kinds of questions in general, I just don't like them. Do they work? Yes, sometimes they do. Genuinely, they do. But in general, I hate these kinds of questions because imagine you were asked that, right? Imagine you're going to buy a program or a car, and the sales rep comes up to you. They start talking to you guys, start talking and everything, and they ask you, what keeps you awake at night? What keeps you up at night, dude? What do you think to yourself? You think dude, stop. I know what you're trying to do, right? And when it comes to general consumers that are not salespeople, right? When you ask them these kinds of questions, what keeps you awake at night? What they feel, they might not know what you're doing. They might not know, oh, this is a sales tactic that you're trying to do. Some of them obviously do. They do know. But they're going to feel something deep down. They're going to be like, wait, I've been here before. Because at this point, everybody's been sold something before, whether it's a car, a program, whatever, everybody's been sold something. And the person's going to they're going to get a feeling from that kind of question where they're like, wait, this sounds kind of familiar. Maybe they weren't asked that same exact question, what keeps you awake at night, but they were probably asked something similar with the same intention. And because of that, they're just going to trust you less. Because if they bought something before that, they were asked a similar question and then didn't end up well, they're going to get the same impression from the question that you asked. And even if what you're selling is legit, they're just not going to trust you because of that feeling. So I'll make that extremely clear. The customer is thinking, is it worth it for me? What is it like? If I purchase this, am I going to make more than what I pay for? And if you can establish, if they can feel that if they buy this, they're going to get more than what they pay for, then they're going to buy. They absolutely have zero reason not to, right? So this is a very important concept, and this leads me to my next point, which is basically the proper way to sell. Okay, the quote unquote new way to sell, whatever you want to call it. This is the proper way, and I want you to think of it like this. Imagine you had a lost friend, a friend who is basically just screwing up their life, right? They may have been taking drugs, they may have been, just generally doing bad stuff, maybe performing poorly in school, right? And you saw this and you were like, oh my God, no, that's my homie, I gotta go help them out, right? So you go to them, you have a talk with them, right? And you plan out this long, deep, heartfelt talk with them, and think about it, what happened in the end? What happened in the end with this friend that you had this long talk with? You probably got them thinking, right? They were probably thinking to themselves, even if you didn't convince them, they were probably thinking damn, you might be right, And you may not have realized this, but the same exact thing you did there with that friend who was lost in life and you had to talk with, that's exactly what sales is. You just didn't realize it. You don't realize it, but you actually sold them on your belief of what they were doing wrong. You used tonality shifts, you talked with like a high level of conviction, you appealed to their logic, you appealed to their emotion, you did all these things. But you had one intention in mind, just one intention. It was to actually help them. You actually cared, and that's why you did so well. Now imagine you could extract that energy and apply that to every single one of your sales calls. How much better would you perform? Probably a lot better. And this leads me to my point where it's how to actually sell. The new way of sales, we don't use a script. We don't use any script. We don't use any like general framework. No. It's just how can we actually help the customer? And in doing so, what you may not even realize is if you actually help the customer and they feel that you're trying to help them, you don't need to build rapport. Think about it. When someone's actually trying to help you, you can feel that. As opposed to someone who's not trying to help you and trying to take advantage of you, like that sales guy and trying to sell you a car, right? You can feel that this person is not trying to help you, but you can feel the actual emotion, the energy that you get from someone who's actually trying to help you. And because of this, who do you gravitate towards more? The person who's being polite to you, but you can tell they're basically just doing all these things to get you to like them, or the person who actually cares about you is not doing any of this stuff, but actually wants to help you. You obviously gravitate towards this person. Right? So as much as I said rapport doesn't matter, it does, but it does in a sense where you have to get the customer to trust you. And you get them to trust you by just actually being helpful. So it's a very important concept to understand. You can basically do 2 in 1. Now, the way we do sales, okay, this new way of sales, we don't use this, all right? I'm going to draw a big circle with an X, right? And it's the script. We don't use a script. Right? Why? Because it's actually pretty interesting why we don't use a script. I want you to think about when your sales manager or whoever taught you sales or whoever made that script, think about what was going through their head when they were making that script. Right? They were thinking to themselves, what kind of questions should we generally ask? What do these prospects generally respond the best to? They think to themselves, and that's how they structure their questions. They structure the questions in a way where it appeals to the majority of customers, right? That's the whole point of a script. You want something that generally works for everybody. But the problem that this script doesn't account for is just outliers. Because there's going to be a very specific kind of person that this script just doesn't apply to. And I'm pretty sure every salesperson probably has had something like this happen to them, where you get a customer that the script doesn't apply to, and you don't know what to do. It's like, think back to the time when you first started sales, you were first handed that script, and you're reading it, and you're like, oh shit, you had your first sales, you're like, oh shit, where do I go from here? Shit, they said this, oh my God, what do I do? And maybe now that you're more experienced, that happens less, but it still happens time to time when there are outlier customers. And maybe you got away with it, once or twice, but imagine every customer was an outlier customer that you could not depend on the script for, right? You wouldn't close anybody. And this is the point of the scripts. They appeal to a general amount of people, a general audience. So these outliers, you're not going to be able to close these people, okay? So it's very important to understand that if you want to reach your full potential with sales, you cannot use a script. Okay, and the perfect metaphor for this is like cars, right? I see scriptless selling, like not using a script, as driving like a Porsche Carrera GT, right? If you know anything about cars, you know that this specific car it's like a legendary car because there's a lot of people, there's a lot of famous celebrities who have driven this car and they actually ended up dying in this car because they crashed, right? And you might ask, like, oh, why do they still drive this car then? And the reason is because it's a true Porsche. It's a legendary car that just handles super well. It feels like unreal, right? And I compare this to scriptless selling because with scriptless selling, the risk is very high. You may in the beginning lose some sales calls. You're gonna ask some dumb questions. You're gonna mess up a few times, and you're gonna lose some people, right? You're gonna lose some sales. But the potential of it, the reason why you would do something like this is because the potential is just so high, just like that car. The car, it's like the risk is super high. You might lose control, but it's just such a fun car to drive that that's why you want to do it. Same thing with scripted selling. Now, on the other hand, you have scripted selling. I see scripted selling as a very basic Toyota. It gets you to where you want to be, where you're making some money, you're generally doing okay, but you will never reach your full potential. If you've ever driven a Honda or a Toyota, and you're a young guy, or like in general, it's like if you've ever tried pushing it to the limit, you try hitting the gas, you're like, what the heck is this? It's like, it's not even going. Is it even going? And the potential, it goes to show the potential of the car is very low. It's like, it gets you to where you want to be, more than enough, right? It has Bluetooth, it has maybe some CarPlay, it's basic, but the potential of it is just nothing. It's not fun. It doesn't get you where you want to be. And that's exactly what scripted sales is. It's like you're going to sell some people, but a lot of times you're going to miss out on what could have happened had you been doing scriptless selling, had you been able to do the techniques that we were able to do with scriptless selling and appeal to those outliers. Okay? So next point I'm going to touch on is basically like the structure of a sales call, this specific sales call. There's not really a structure. I mentioned earlier, like there's no structure for this. There really isn't. Okay? But for the sake of helping better understand this, I'm going to paint this. There's only two things. So there's really not a structure. And the first thing is discovery. And the second thing is pressure, right? Or objection handling. Okay, so we're going to use OBJ for short. So discovery and pressure/objection handling. Now, discovery with scriptless selling is going to be about 80% of your call. You're going to spend 80% of your time figuring out whether or not, like this specific thing you're selling makes sense for the customer, why they would even need it, what would make sense for their specific situation, and just doing a lot of these kinds of questions. That's 80% of your time right there. Okay? And the other 20% is going to be spent on pressure/objection handling. Okay? Now, I don't know how your time is divided now in terms of your sales calls, but I would assume that you guys probably don't ask that many questions. It's probably not 80% of your time is spent on asking questions. Maybe more like 50%, 40, maybe 60 for some people, other people with, more question-intensive scripts. But in scriptless selling, 80% of your time is going to be spent on discovery, and it only makes sense because if we're actually here to help the customer, the majority of the time should be dedicated to making sure this makes sense for them. Of course, if you want to convey that they can make more than what they pay for, you have to know a lot of things about them. You have to know how much time they have, what they do for a living. Do they have kids? Do they even have the time for this? Do they have the resources for this? All these very important things that it's very difficult to cover in just such a limited amount of questions. And guess what? Every person is different. Right? You're going to have people who have families. You're going to have people who have no families or just young. They have all the time in the world for, what if you're selling for example, if you're selling a program, a course or something, right? You're going to have people who have a lot of time, people who don't have a lot of time. If you're selling a car, you're going to have people who don't need a sports car. They're looking for a minivan. You're going to the point is for you to properly sell the specific thing you're selling and make sure that it makes sense for your customer, you have to ask a lot of very subjective questions that are going to vary depending on the kind of person that we're selling to. Okay? So that's why 80% of our time is spent on discovery. Every person is different. And because of this, because we spend so much time on our discovery, guess what the customer is going to feel? They're going to be like, damn, okay, this guy gets it. Like, damn, okay. You know, because they're talking about themselves the whole time. And again, like this is not something I touched on earlier, but when generally people talk about themselves, they like to do that. You know, so you get them to talk about themselves, they actually like you more. Regardless, 80% of the time is spent on discovery and 20% of the time is spent on pressure/objection handling. All right? Now, how do we do this? How do we actually get better at this? Because it's probably not something you've thought about yet in terms of just how do we actually approach this. But if you actually imagine yourself doing this, where do you even start? You know, like, how do you even start something like this? Like, you know, on the script, it's so easy. It's like, introduce yourself to Joe. Hey, what's up, Joe? I'm, you know, ask this question. Yo, like, are you, you know, it's just scripted. So how do we approach scriptless selling? The answer is it's going to be very awkward. It's almost like, the best example I give you is like talking to, like approaching a girl for the first time. It's just so weird. It's like, what do you even say? Like, hi, my name is, you know, it's very weird at first. But what happens after you do it time and time and time and time again? You find a balance. You find something that works, right? And I always like, whenever I'm doing new things, I always like to think of it this way. I always like to think there's a far left and there's a far right. Either end is the wrong place you want to be. You know, you want to be somewhere in the middle because that's where everything kind of just tweaks. That's like the sweet spot, right? And in order to get to the middle, we have to try both sides. We have to basically mess up, right? We, like, for example, if we go back to the example with, you know, talking to a girl, maybe you are too aggressive, right? You come across too strong. That's the far right. You come across way too strong. So then what's the natural thing to do? You got to tone it down, right? But are you going to hit the middle on your first time? No, right? So you might become off too passive. You might be on the left. You're too passive. But eventually, after we try things, we're like, okay, this is too passive. This is too aggressive. And then what happens? You fine tune until you get to the middle. And that's the sweet spot. And it's the same thing for doing discovery, right? We ask questions. We maybe come off too personal, right? So we change it. And then maybe we don't come off personal enough. So we fine tune and we get to the middle. And that's exactly how this works. It's going to be very uncomfortable in the beginning. You're probably going to you're going to get into very awkward situations when you're talking to them, and you're going to think to yourself, you're going to try to actually remember the script. Like, fuck, I'm just going to go back to the script. But you can't do that. The way you get better at scriptless selling is the entire time on the sales calls, you have to embrace the fact that you might mess up. And it's okay. Because after the sales call, as long as you take the initiative to just think about what you could have done better, what were the specific questions you asked that were not in the right direction, like what could you have asked better, what could you have done better? As long as you take the approach to do that, you're going to improve with every single call you take. And eventually, you're going to take enough calls to the point where you actually get good at this. And what you're going to notice is your close rate's going to skyrocket. The amount of commission you're going to make is also going to skyrocket. And guess what? Your peers are also going to be like, what did this guy do? What is he doing? You know? And the reality is there's no magic. There's no special question you're asking. There's no crazy thing you're doing. There's no magic script. It's like you just got really good at sales. So they're not going to be able to copy you. Because think about it. How many people are willing to go through that sacrifice of in the very beginning, they have to lose a bunch of sales. They have to perform like shit in order to actually get good. How many people on your offer are actually willing to make that sacrifice? Getting seen by all the other people. You have to basically make it so that in the beginning, your close rate's going to dip. Your sales manager is going to see that. Your coworkers, everybody's going to see that. How many people are actually going to be willing to put in that sacrifice for that reward? Very few people. Very few people. So it's not something you have to get scared of losing. You just got good at sales. Now, the only issue, though, you might run into is that you might lose your job, right? Because if you start doing scriptless selling and you have to embrace the fact that your sales are going to go down, you're going to miss out on some sales, your sales manager might think, dude, what happened with Brian? What happened with Joe? What happened with Sally? What's going on, bro? Like, why'd your close rate go down? You know? And it's not really as simple as you telling them, oh, I'm trying this new thing, scriptless selling. They're going to be like, are you crazy? No, we gave you a script, use it. Like, what are you doing? Because it's not in their best interest for you to obviously do this, right? So that's obviously something that happens. The only real way around this is, the only real way is just to have somebody to basically handhold you on what specific question you ask. So it basically minimizes the amount of time where you have to figure it out on your own and you get the exact right answer you were looking for, right? On what you did wrong in that sales call. And that's why for me, I'm offering coaching for a very specific kind of person, okay? If you are in an offer and you want to do scriptless selling, you want to actually make the most of your offer, you want to be better than people, you want to make as much money and get as good at closing as possible, I'm offering coaching for a very specific kind of person that is looking to get good at this. Okay, and what's going to happen is you're going to have a sales call where you try this, and I'm going to tell you exactly what you did wrong, the exact kind of question you should have asked instead of asking this, the kind of tonality you should have, A to Z, just what you should have done better, what you could have done better. And if you think that I can save you 1 or 2 sales calls worth of commission, it was worth your money. Because that progress is going to carry on from each new call that you do that you had help. It's going to cut down on basically the amount of time that you need to progress. So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, click the link below, sign up for a free call. If it's a great fit, we're going to start working together. If it's not, then no worries.